Hello, and welcome to our webinar on evolving from Omni Price to Rockton Pricing Management. My name is Mark Rockwell. I'm an owner and an architect of RPM, or Rockton Pricing Management, here at Rockton Software. And I'd like to show you some of the cool features we've got going on with Rockton Pricing Management. If you're familiar with Omni Price, some of these things will relate, and there may be some new features here that are very exciting for you to see. I'd like to start our conversation with how businesses work, think, and operate. Almost all businesses go down this path. Most of them start with a really keep it simple type of framework with a traditional price list. Most businesses have an accounting system, and in their accounting system, they know and are able to compute the cost. I have on this screen an example of just 10 inventory items. They happen to all be hand tools, so I might be a hardware distribution company. And these 10 items on the left-hand side are in my accounting system with their known costs. And so what we dream of is we say, hey, let's take a look at our overhead. Let's take a look at our profit margin. Let's all these different costs of operating. And we'll say, I need a 32% margin. And so companies, it varies what you need to figure out what your margin is. But for this company, as an example, we say, hey, I want 32%. And that will give me a great rate at which to make sure that I'm covering my operating costs and I'm making a decent profit so that we can stay in business and we can grow. So they copy all 10 items in their inventory list over into a price sheet. And they love their price sheets. Everybody loves price sheets. So what we've done just now by creating a price sheet is we have copied over 10 records, and we are now managing 10 records. And so that's a few records to manage. Granted, the list is small right here. But a question that we ask is, why did we copy over 10 records when everything is just a 32% margin? Wouldn't it be easier if instead a more simple approach is to say, look, we need our retail price list, and it's 32% margin over cost. Notice that in this model, we only have one record and not 10. So there's only one thing to manage. And in fact, if we wanted to, we could change this number to 33% if later on that we wanted, we'd be changing one record, not 10. So that's in itself is a different mind shift about how to think about price lists, but this is how most people think about doing their pricing. The next thing is that after you get going in business for a while, you say, hey, I want to reward our loyal customers. So let's take our top selling customers, let's call them gold. Let's take our kind of next top to silver and create bronze. And let's just give a 15, 10, or 5% discount on the gold, silver, bronze lists. So we create more price lists. And now you can see that we've taken our retail price list, we've copied it, we've done some math, each of these in their own little sheet. And now we're up to 40 records. That's in the lower left-hand corner there. What if you did it differently? What if instead you had just 4 records, one with your 32% margin, and then just a simple discount for your gold, silver, and bronze customers just based on that? 4 versus 40. There's a 10-fold decrease in the number of records that you need to manage when you think about it. And this conceptually is how Rockton Pricing Management behaves. It's rules-driven, and we're not necessarily processing a whole bunch of spreadsheets. Then management decides, you know what? We need to include free shipping. And in the North American market, there are 8 UPS zones, and we're going to exclusively do UPS. So we're going to now create 8 times as many price sheets because we need a price sheet for it. So if you call us up and you're in zone 4, we're going to find the zone 4 price sheet. Oh, and you're a silver customer, so we're going to find the zone 4 silver price sheet. So now we have 8 times as many price sheets, 8 times as many records. As you can see in the lower left-hand corner, we're up to 320. Mind you, this is only with an inventory of 10. Or if you think about it from the Rockton Pricing Management, let's provide free shipping. We've only got 12 records. We're taking each of our UPS zones, we're marking up a certain percentage based on the distance that it needs to travel, and we have much fewer records to manage. Could you also imagine if, let's suppose that the UPS published some new price sheets and zones 5 and 6 needed to be incremented? How would you go and increment that zones 5 and 6? You'd have to find those specific sheets, and you have to update those specific sheets, and not all the sheets, just some of them. So this, again, showing that there's 12 records instead of several hundred. Then somebody gets a bright idea. Let's have a sale. And so with the sale, we're just going to go ahead and duplicate everything. We're going to double it because we have to have sale prices and everything because we need to mark everything off 10%. So you got to have the original price sheets before we go back. But now we need to create price sheets By doubling them, they take everything 10% off, and then we have to go in and calculate across all these price sheets this extra 10% off. So now we're at 640 records, and of course the RPM way would be, let's just create a calculation there in orange, discount for the month of March, we're going to take a 10% off because we're having a sale. So again, it's that measure of 640 records or 13 records. How many would you like to manage? And what makes more sense? What's easier to understand, and what's more straightforward? At this point, when we realized that we doubled the number of records that we needed just to have a sale, a lot of companies scratch their head and go, should we customize? This is getting really complicated. I got a lot of sheets going on here. Let's write a customization for handling a sale, or let's write a customization that handles the UPS zones. And so they think about doing just that thing, and then they customize it. And customizations can sometimes be more affordable because they're smaller or maintainable than perhaps buying a full-blown solution. But the question is it going to last? Is your business going to be stagnant for the next 20 years to where that customization is going to hold up or not? It's a really good question. Because after we customized that, somebody came and said, let's provide quantity breaks at 10, 25, and 100, because if you buy more, we want to give you more of a discount. So now we have just made 4 times as many price sheets, and now we're up to over 2,500 records. And of course, as you can imagine, it's not that complicated in Rockton Pricing Management. And then let's invent something else. We call it chaos. So pretty much businesses change. This is the let's create chaos, or let's shave our heads bald while chewing on a piece of tinfoil type of mentality. Businesses change. They invent new rules, stuff happens, and now with just a simple inventory, 10-item inventory system, we're up to like 12,000 records here that we're trying to manage. And as they change over time, do you imagine what it's like to go back into all these different spreadsheets and the spreadsheets and which version and all that? It can be really, really challenging. So let's suppose that you've still got that working. The reality is that 2 years from now, New Jersey is going to slap a shipping tax on you for 3%. Well, if you had to do it with the number of worksheets you're doing, you're going to have to double the number of records that you have again. You're going to have to duplicate your price sheets and divide them into New Jersey and non-New Jersey designations. If you're using Rockton Pricing Management, you simply need to add 3% if the location you're shipping from is New Jersey. 1 record versus doubling all the records that you have. And while these are just examples that may not apply to you, you can imagine is that as your business grows, things like this come up. They absolutely do. How about this one? Let's do a tariff on Chinese imports starting tomorrow. And then tomorrow, maybe we won't. And in this case, in this inventory system, our Chinese items happen to be screwdrivers. So if you're in the traditional model, you're going to go through roughly 30% because there were 3 out of 10 were screwdrivers in our inventory. You're going to go through all those price sheets, and you're going to find all the screwdrivers, you're going to add 60%. And then you're going to make copies of those spreadsheets, and you're going to save them because we might undo that tariff tomorrow over time. With Rockton Pricing Management, you simply say, is my country of origin China? If so, let's add a 60% tariff to the price of the item. And because it's one simple rule, if you don't need the rule, then tomorrow morning you can simply delete the rule or turn it off. A much simpler way to do things. But business keeps on changing. Now we suddenly have a steel tax based on the weight of the metal in the item. Back in our inventory list, most of those things, the level, the handsaw, the screwdrivers, they contain metal, but in varying amounts. So you likely have the varying amount of metal in your inventory system inside of your accounting system. But in the traditional way, you're going to have to rework your spreadsheets again. You're going to take item-specific sheet after sheet after sheet, add this new column of weight information, create a bunch of calculations, and I don't know how many records you have to, but it's a lot more chaos. With Rockton Pricing Management, if you have the weight and is tied to an item, it's an attribute, you can use a simple formula to take that attribute, you can multiply by the unit of measure, and if need be, if you're doing a case of saws or a single saw, and then calculate the tax on the steel in that item using just one formula. And you can do that rather quickly. You can imagine the hours and hours it would take to do it the traditional way. And somebody wakes up and says, oh my goodness, we've been in business 7 years now. We are losing our shirt on commodities. And the commodities in this case happen to be nail pullers. And in our inventory, that includes crowbars and hammers. Well, remember when we started at the very beginning, everything across the board we knew was 32% margin in order to stay in business and make a profit. And now what we're realizing is that, you know what? Some commodity items need to be at a lower profit margin, but we still need to cover overhead. And so we really need to divide those things out. When the traditional way, we need to basically start over. And that means going back through all your price sheets, your whole paradigm, and gutting it or working with it. And what can we do with that? With Rockton Pricing Management, you could actually just split that 32% overhead at the beginning into two components. Say you do it 20 and 12, for instance. You could say, hey, I need a rule that says my overhead's 20% for markup, but then I'm going to put my profit into a different value, which is 12%. And on the commodities, I'm going to make that profit only 6%. So now we're just adding a rule or two and perhaps taking one rule away with Rockton Pricing Management, a much simpler way to do that. And then the question is how are we going to handle our competitor prices? We know that we're selling a hammer for $14 retail and our competitor's selling it for $13.50. What are we going to do about that? Do you have the ability to do a minimum or maximum based on a comparative value if you know what your competitor's price is? That's a question. Well, with Rockton Pricing Management, if you know that your competitor's selling it for $13.50, you can make a rule that says we're going to never be beat. So we're going to move our price down to $13.50, or we're going to beat it by 10%, or we're going to make sure that we're within 2% margin of that, so that we're close, but not completely out of the realm. What's nice about Rockton Pricing Management is you can slice and dice the specific items, target specific groups of items based on attributes, or specific customers based on attributes, or any types of grouping that you want in order to create specific rules that make sense to you. What we're really aiming for is for you to deploy a strategy to be predictably and confidently profitable. And how you do that is you separate your independent levels of pricing. You make them independent of one another. So for instance, the things that we've talked about, you can start with cost. You can add landed costs if you want. You can break out your percentages to 20%, apply your quantity breaks, get your discounts, your promotions all going as well. Any level that you have is independent of any other level. So that your UPS shipping zone is independent of your tariffs. So you don't have to do a cross product of those in a whole bunch of spreadsheets of every combination of both of those. As you can imagine, you're getting thousands and thousands of records, thousands and thousands of sheets. Make them independent, make them behave independently. Any single level can and should be driven by attributes of your customers or items. And not just your customers or items, but dates, locations, certain custom values, pretty much anything you can dream of. And keeping in mind that every single level in behavior is an independent calculation that gets you where you want. And the magic is you put your profit margin at the bottom. That's where you're putting your confidence in your predictable profitability. And so by doing that at the end, you can say, look, with all of this thing that's going on, I need to make 5% profit. I need to make 10% profit, whatever that profit margin is, that makes you stay in business and want to stay in business. And of course, you might have to calculate commissions and rebates after you figure out your profit margin. You can certainly change the order in which you calculate these different things, and certainly not all of these will apply to you in every case. The thing is, it's incredibly flexible. And more importantly, as things change, like tariffs come up suddenly, you just insert the tariff rule in the middle of the stack. You don't need to worry about re-engineering the rest of your price lists, because price lists are dead. They really don't work in a business that's going to grow and change and be scalable over time. But Rockton Pricing Management, when it compares to Omni Price, does so much more. We also built in these features of buy one, get one free, buy one, get one at a discounted off. If you buy a handbag and a purse, we will give you a pair of shoes for free. Every accounting system that I know of has only one discount. With Rockton Pricing Management, you have unlimited discounts, and every single discount can be tracked in detail to the general ledger so that you can break out the different components. You can break out your tariff from your discount, from your sales promotion, from your commission, or whatever. Likewise, unlimited promotions. And as I just mentioned, you can track all of these things. Every component of your pricing can be tracked to your general ledger in detail so you can see exactly how it's performing and run metrics against them. We do rebates, we do royalties, and commissions. Yes, a complete, full-blown commission engine based on all of the attributes of your customers and items and how they're seen. A very compelling side effect of how we have made Rockton Pricing Management is that you get a full-blown commission system as well. We allow you to evaluate groupings of items and thresholds. So if you're selling multiple line items on an order, and 3 out of 5 of those items are of a certain item class, and you want to know as soon as you sell more than 10 of that item class of things, then we provide a discount. Well, we can do that as well. We can look at your historical sales to drive your pricing calculations, as well as other line items that are on a given order in order to determine discounts, promotions, or other things like that. What also separates Rockton Pricing Management from other pricing solutions is that we have exceptional exception handling, meaning in a typical world, if you have one special exception of a price on an item, and you have an inventory price list of just 10 items, but there's an exception with one of them, the typical solution is to take that list of 10 items and copy it over and change the one value. We don't do that. We say just take the one thing that's changed and move it into an exception bucket and change its value. And then you're only managing the exception, not the whole set that's repeated. A lot of ERP systems require you to copy the whole list over again and change just one little thing. And keep in mind that in our examples, we only had 10 inventory items. How many do you have? Do you have 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 items? You can imagine the scale at which the number of records you have to manage really escalates quickly. Rockton Pricing Management is an engine that sits outside of your accounting system. We make API calls to it. Basically, we pass in a customer, an item, and some other information if it's necessary. The engine does all of this work using that and quickly returns a price back to you. But along with the price, we return computations of price adjustments, such as royalties, rebates, and commissions, your discounts, your margins and things, and the GL accounts that you want to map them to. And then we book those to the general ledger as well. Rockton Pricing Management is incredibly flexible. It's future-proof, and it doesn't require you to put together customization that's later going to break. So that's an overview of Rockton Pricing Management. If you've got further questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to answer those questions, give you a one-off demo, or provide you with any other information. Really appreciate your time. Thanks.